If I open the vault, I want 100 million, a girl told a millionaire. But moments later, something terrible happened. Comment. What you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Sweat dripped down Arthur Kensington's forehead as he watched the safe specialist shake his head once more. It was the third technician in 2 days, and the result was always the same. The safe remained sealed like a steel tomb, guarding documents that could either save or definitively condemn his industrial equipment company. Mr. Kensington, the electronic system had a catastrophic failure, the man said, packing away his tools with a defeated expression. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if someone reprogrammed the internal codes. I'll be honest, it would be easier to blow this thing up than to open it. Arthur felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. At 52, he had built Kensington equipment from scratch, transforming a small family business into one of the main suppliers of industrial machinery in Springfield, Ohio. Now everything threatened to collapse because of an IRS investigation accusing him of tax evasion. "How much time do we have?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the tension of the last few days. "The hearing is tomorrow morning," replied Dr. Henry Morgan, his lawyer, who watched everything with growing concern. "If we don't present the documents proving the legality of the operations, the judge could order a total freeze of the company's assets." After the technician left, Arthur remained alone in his office, staring at the safe as if he could open it by sheer force of will. Inside that steel box were the original invoices, signed contracts, and all the paperwork that proved his innocence. Without them, it would be just his word against the accusations. The company was quiet late that afternoon. The employees had been sent home early, a forced saving that pained Arthur's chest. Many of those people had worked with him for decades, trusted him. The thought of letting them down was almost unbearable. Roger Malone, his minority partner, had called 3 times during the day, always with the same false tone of concern. "Arthur, friend, maybe it's time to accept that some documents got lost. We can rebuild everything, start from scratch." There was something in Roger's voice that bothered Arthur, an urgency that didn't match his usually calm personality. The businessman decided to go for a walk through the downtown streets. He needed to breathe, to think of some solution that didn't involve accepting defeat. Springfield was bustling with the typical early evening movement. College students walking in groups, shopkeepers closing their stores, the aroma of coffee and cinnamon rolls that always characterized the Ohio city. It was when he passed the area near the bus station that he noticed the girl. She was sitting on a sidewalk, leaning against the wall of an abandoned commercial building. Her clothes were dirty, her tangled brown hair partially covering a small face that showed a seriousness unusual for someone so young. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "Mister," she said, as Arthur passed, her voice surprisingly clear, "do you have any food?" Arthur hesitated. He wasn't the type to stop and talk to strangers on the street, especially vulnerable children. But there was something in her eyes, a sharp intelligence that contrasted with her disheveled appearance. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her level. "Isabel," she replied, tilting her head slightly. "You're sad. I can hear it in your voice." The observation caught him off guard. "Hear what?" "People make different sounds when they're sad, angry, or scared. You are sad and scared at the same time." She paused, as if processing information only she could capture. "And there's something beating hard in your chest, harder than normal." Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. The girl was right. His heart raced whenever he thought about the next day's hearing. "Do you have a family, Isabel? Anyone taking care of you?" "No." The answer was simple, without self-pity. "But I get by just fine. I know how to hear things others don't." "What kind of things?" Isabel stood up and walked to a nearby parked car. She put her ear to the bodywork and was silent for a few seconds. "This car's engine has a problem with the left piston. It's going to break in about 2 days if the owner doesn't change the oil." Arthur frowned. How could a 4-year-old know something like that? "And you," she continued, turning to him, "with piercing eyes, have something locked that you need to open. Something important that's hidden in a metal box." Arthur's blood ran cold. It was impossible for her to know about the safe. It was impossible for anyone to know. "How do you—" "I know how to hear secrets inside closed boxes," Isabel said with disconcerting naturalness. "If you take me to where this box is, I can try to help." Isabel's proposal echoed in Arthur's mind like an impossible echo. A 4-year-old child offering to solve a problem that had left 3 safe specialists completely stumped. Logic screamed it was absurd, but desperation whispered that he had nothing left to lose. "Isabel, do you understand what you're saying? You're talking about opening something that very smart people couldn't." "I know," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But smart people only know how to look. I know how to listen." She paused and tilted her head again. "Your problem isn't just the metal box, is it? There are people who want to hurt you because of what's inside." Arthur felt his legs weaken. How could she know that? "Are you hungry?" he asked, changing the subject. As he processed the surreal situation, "Always," Isabel replied with brutal sincerity. Arthur took her to a nearby bakery, watching as she devoured a cinnamon roll as if she hadn't eaten in days. That was probably the case. During the impromptu meal, he studied the girl with growing attention. There was something different about her, something that went beyond precocious intelligence. "Isabel, how long have you been living on the street?" "Since Aunt Rose left," she said, licking her fingers to enjoy every crumb. "She took care of me after my mom, after she got sick." "And your mother, what happened to her?" The girl's face clouded over for a moment. "She cried a lot. She said bad people wanted to hurt her because of wrong numbers. One day, some men in white coats came and took her away. Aunt Rose said it was so she could get better, but she never came back." Arthur felt a tightness in his chest. The story sounded all too familiar, reminding him of Carmela Vance, his former accounting employee who had disappeared 4 years ago. Carmela had also mentioned problems with numbers, irregularities that made her increasingly nervous before she simply vanished. "What was your mother's full name?" "Carmela Vance," Isabel replied without hesitation. The world stopped. Arthur felt the coffee rise in his throat, a feeling of nausea mixed with shock. Carmela had been one of his most competent employees, responsible for organizing important tax documents. She had worked for him for 3 years before disappearing without explanation. "Isabel, are you sure about that name?" "Of course. She always said I had to remember her full name for when she came back." The girl's eyes filled with a contained sadness, but she didn't come back. Arthur needed a few minutes to process the revelation. Carmela had a daughter who now lived on the streets while her mother was institutionalized somewhere, and for some incomprehensible reason, this child claimed she could hear secrets inside locked safes. "Isabel, if I take you to my company, do you really think you can help with the safe?" "I can try," she said, wiping her hands on a napkin. "But if I succeed, can you help me find my mom?" The question hit Arthur like a punch. He had been Carmela's boss. He should have noticed something was wrong, should have helped when she began to show signs of stress. Maybe he could make up for some of that failure now. "Yes," he said, surprised by the firmness of his own voice. "If you help me, I'll help you find your mother." The drive to the company was silent. Isabel watched everything through the car window with curiosity, but Arthur was lost in thought. How had Carmela left the company? He vaguely remembered Roger mentioning that she had resigned for personal reasons, but he had never questioned the details. Kensington Equipment occupied a three-story building in the industrial district. At night, with only the security lighting, the place looked ghostly. Arthur led Isabel through the corridors to his second-floor office, where the imposing safe dominated an entire wall. "Is this it?" she asked, approaching the steel structure. "This is it." The expert said the electronic system had a failure that changed all the codes. Isabel placed both hands flat on the cold surface of the safe and closed her eyes. She remained like that for almost 5 minutes, so still that Arthur wondered if she had fallen asleep standing up. "It wasn't a failure," she finally said, opening her eyes. "Someone changed the numbers on purpose. There's a different sound when it's an accident and when it's on purpose. How can you know that?" "The metal remembers sounds," she explained with disconcerting naturalness. "And this one remembers someone tampering with the numbers 3 days ago at night." Arthur felt a chill down his spine. 3 days ago was exactly when the failure had been discovered, and only 3 people had access to the office at night: himself, Roger, and Martha, the secretary who had been with the company for 15 years. "Can you hear what sequence was used?" Isabel leaned against the safe again, this time resting her ear directly on the surface. Her small fingers drummed rhythmically on the steel as she concentrated. 7, 4, 9, 2, 1, 6, she murmured slowly. "And then you have to press the small button twice." Arthur typed the sequence with trembling hands. On the last key, he heard the mechanical sound he had been waiting for 3 days. The bolts moving, the system unlocking. The heavy door swung open with a metallic sigh. For a moment, he just stared at the inside of the safe, barely believing it was really open. Dozens of organized folders, documents, representing 30 years of honest work, contracts that would prove his innocence. "Did I do it?" asked Isabel with a shy smile. "You did it," Arthur replied, feeling tears of relief stream down his face. But as he began to remove the folders to organize the documents for the next day's hearing, something unexpected fell to the floor. A birth certificate, yellowed with age, with the name Isabel Vance in clear letters. The girl picked up the paper before he could react. "It's my birth certificate," she said, surprised. "Why was it in your metal box?" Arthur looked at the document, then at the girl, feeling he had stumbled upon something much bigger than a simple safe malfunction. Why had Carmela left her daughter's birth certificate at his company? And why had she never mentioned she had a child? "Isabel, do you remember your mother working here?" "I remember her leaving early in the morning and coming back sad in the afternoon," the girl said, studying the certificate. "She always said the numbers didn't add up, that someone was doing wrong things. Then she started crying a lot and talking to herself. Just then, Arthur heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming up the company stairs. Someone who knew exactly where to find him. The footsteps approached down the hall with a cadence Arthur recognized immediately. Roger Malone was coming up the stairs with his characteristic walk, always a bit shuffling, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. But there was something different that night, a haste that didn't match his usually controlled personality. "Hide the certificate," Arthur whispered to Isabel, who obeyed instantly, folding the paper and tucking it into the pocket of her dirty blouse. "Arthur, are you there?" Roger's voice echoed down the hall. "I saw your light on and thought, my God, you managed to open the safe." Roger appeared in the office doorway, his 48 years showing more in the expression of surprise he couldn't completely hide. His eyes jumped from the open safe to Isabel, who remained partially hidden behind Arthur. "How did you do it?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual, but Arthur noticed a tension in his partner's voice. "I had some unexpected help," Arthur replied, protectively placing a hand on Isabel's shoulder. "This is Isabel. She has a special talent for hearing mechanisms." Roger studied the girl with excessive attention, his eyes narrowing slightly. Isabel. What an interesting name. Where do you know this child from, Arthur? I found her on the street tonight. She was hungry. Arthur decided not to mention the connection to Carmela yet. Something in Roger's behavior made him uncomfortable. What a remarkable coincidence, Roger murmured, without taking his eyes off Isabel. A street child who can open safes. Really, what a small world. Isabel, who had remained quiet, suddenly tilted her head and stared at Roger with disconcerting intensity. "You're lying," she said with childlike naturalness. "Your heart is beating like when people tell lies." Roger's face twitched for a fraction of a second before he forced a laugh. "Kids say the darndest things, don't they? What an imagination." "She's not imagining," Arthur said, a suspicion growing in his chest. "Isabel has exceptional hearing. She can hear things others don't notice." "Oh, really?" Roger took a step forward, and Arthur noticed how Isabel instinctively recoiled. "And what else can you hear, little one?" "I can hear that you came here other times when it was dark," said Isabel, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. 3 nights ago, you tampered with the metal box. The silence that followed was as tense as a rope about to snap. Roger stopped smiling, and Arthur felt the pieces of a sinister puzzle beginning to fall into place in his mind. "Roger," he said slowly, "were you here the night the safe stopped working? Arthur, are you going to believe a street kid over a partner who's worked with you for 8 years? Roger's voice had taken on a hardness Arthur had never heard before. "It depends on what she's saying," Arthur replied, keeping himself between Roger and Isabel. "Did you sabotage the safe?" Roger sighed deeply, as if tired of keeping up a charade. "Sabotage is a very strong word, Arthur. I just postponed the inevitable." "What does that mean?" "It means you're too naive to understand that this company needs drastic changes to survive." Roger walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "It means some people need to get out of the way so others can do what needs to be done. Some people like Carmela Vance?" The name made Roger turn sharply. "How do you know about Carmela?" "She's my mother," said Isabel, stepping out from behind Arthur with sudden courage. "And you made her sick. Your mother?" Roger looked from Isabel to Arthur, processing the information. "So you're the little daughter of our dear accountant. Carmela always talked about you, you know. Said you were special, that you could hear things others couldn't." "Where is she?" asked Isabel, taking a step forward. "In a place where people who ask too many questions end up," Roger replied coldly. "A place where they can no longer cause problems for those who are trying to work." Arthur felt anger rising in his chest. "What did you do to Carmela?" "I didn't do anything. I just made it clear to her that it would be better for everyone if she stopped investigating certain irregularities in our books. Unfortunately, she couldn't handle the pressure. You blackmailed her." "I protected this company," roared Roger, losing his composure. "Carmela was about to uncover operations that guarantee our competitiveness in the market. Operations that you, with your outdated morality, would never approve." "What kind of operations?" Roger laughed bitterly. "Under-invoicing for some special clients, creative invoices, some taxes, reduced. Nothing that every other company in the business doesn't do, Arthur. You're the only one who still believes in doing business like we're in the last century." The revelations hit Arthur like a series of punches. His partner had turned his honest company into a fraudulent operation, had persecuted an employee to the point of a nervous breakdown, and had left a 4-year-old child abandoned on the streets. "You're going to pay for this," he said, walking towards the phone. "No," said Roger, blocking his path. "You're going to sign over your shares to me, accept that you've lost control of the company and disappear quietly, just like Carmela did. And if I refuse, then tomorrow at the hearing, in addition to the tax problems we already have, evidence will appear that you were also involved in the irregularities. I have your signature on documents that compromise you, Arthur." Signatures you made without knowing what you were signing. Arthur felt the ground crumble again. How many times had he signed papers Roger presented to him, trusting in their years-long partnership? How many times had he been too naive to question? "You can't do this," he murmured. "I already have," Roger replied. "And if you try to report me, you'll drag yourself down. 2. The difference is, I have an exit plan. You only have naivety." At that moment, Isabel approached the safe again and placed her ear against the metal structure. "There are more things in there," she said, "things he doesn't want you to find." "What are you hearing?" asked Arthur. "A secret drawer, deep in the back, with papers that make a different noise." Roger turned pale. "The child is making it up. There's no secret drawer." But Arthur was already searching, feeling with his hands at the back of the safe until he found a small, almost imperceptible protrusion. When he pressed it, a secret compartment opened, revealing a folder with documents he had never seen before. "Don't touch that," Roger ordered, but it was too late. Arthur opened the folder and found contracts with altered values, fake invoices, and most importantly, a digital recorder labeled Life Insurance, Carmela Vance. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the device. "Evidence that will destroy you if it falls into the wrong hands," Roger replied, holding out his hand. "Now give me that folder and let's settle this like civilized people." But Isabel had approached and lightly touched the recording. "Device, my mother's voice is in there," she said, her eyes wide, "and she's very scared." Arthur activated the recording device with trembling hands, and Carmela Vance's voice filled the silent office. It was a voice he remembered well, always polite, always helpful, but now laden with a terror that made his heart clench. "Arthur, if you're hearing this, it's because something happened to me," the recording began. "I discovered serious irregularities in the company's accounting. Forged invoices, systematic under-invoicing, diversions totaling millions of dollars. And when I confronted Roger about it," Carmela's voice trembled on the recording. "He told me it would be better for my daughter if I kept my mouth shut. He said accidents happen to people who ask too many questions, especially to little girls who are alone while their mothers work." Isabel approached the device as if she could touch her mother through the recorded voice. "Mom," she whispered, reaching a small hand towards the device. "I'm hiding this recording and the documents that prove everything in Arthur's safe," Carmela's voice continued. "I know he's honest, that he has no knowledge of what's happening. Roger has been forging his signature on several contracts. If something happens to me, please take care of my Isabel. She's special. She can hear things others can't. She's all I have in the world." The recording ended with the sound of Carmela sobbing softly. The silence that followed was broken by Roger. "Very touching," he said, his voice laced with bitter sarcasm. "But that doesn't change anything. You still have your signature on compromising documents, Arthur. You'll still sink with me if you try to report me." "Where is Carmela now?" asked Arthur, carefully pocketing the device and the documents. "At St. Benedict's Psychiatric Hospital in Columbus," Roger answered coldly. "Admitted 4 years ago for an acute psychotic break. The doctors say she has paranoid episodes, believes people are persecuting her. Very sad, really." Arthur felt nauseous. "You caused this." "I didn't cause anything. I just made the consequences of certain actions clear. If she couldn't handle the reality of business, that's her problem." "And Isabel? You knew she was living on the street?" "Children are resilient," Roger said, shrugging. "And frankly, it was better that she disappeared. With that special hearing her mother talked so much about, she could become a problem in the future." Roger's coldness horrified Arthur. This man had deliberately destroyed a family, left a 4-year-old child abandoned on the street, and spoke about it as if discussing the weather. "You're a monster," he said. "I'm a businessman who understands that sentimentalism doesn't pay the bills," Roger retorted. "Now let's solve this. You sign over your shares, I take control of the company, and you walk away with a generous severance package. We all win. And if I refuse? Roger smiled coldly and pulled a phone from his pocket. Then I'll make an anonymous call to the IRS, informing them that you have knowledge of the documents hidden in the safe. Documents that prove your active participation in the schemes. Your signature is on everything, Arthur. Even if it's forged, it will take years to prove it in court, years you don't have. Arthur looked at Isabel, who was watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. The girl had lost her mother because of this man's greed, had lived on the streets for 4 years, and was now about to see the only person who could help her be destroyed as well. "How much time do you give me to decide?" he asked. "Until tomorrow morning. The hearing is at 10. By then, you either sign the papers or I'll make sure you walk out of there straight into a cell." Roger headed for the door, but stopped and turned. "Oh, and Arthur, I suggest you find a proper place for the girl. Orphanages exist for a reason." After Roger left, Arthur sat heavily in his chair, feeling the weight of 4 years of manipulation and blackmail crashing down on him. Isabel approached timidly. "Is he a bad person?" she asked. "Very bad," Arthur replied, pulling her close. "But we'll find a way to stop him. And are we going to find my mom?" "We're going to find your mom," he promised, without knowing how he would fulfill that promise. Over the next few hours, Arthur meticulously examined all the documents found in the secret compartment. The extent of Roger's fraud was staggering. Dozens of altered contracts, fake invoices, diversions totaling nearly $5 million over 4 years. But the worst part was seeing his own signature on documents he had never read. Roger had been meticulous, always presenting papers in the middle of larger stacks, always with plausible explanations that made Arthur sign without question. "I'm an idiot," he murmured. "You're not an idiot," said Isabel, who had found a corner in the office where she curled up in a blanket Arthur kept for when he had to work late. "You're kind. My mom always said that kind people sometimes trust too much. Your mother was wise. She was. She always knew when people were lying, just like me, but she said it's not always good to know the truth." Arthur stopped examining the papers. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes it's better to pretend you don't know until you find the right moment to use the truth." The girl's wisdom impressed him. At 4 years old, she already understood strategy better than he did. "Isabel, could you pretend you don't know me if someone asks?" "I can," she replied. "Why?" "Because I have an idea. But it will be dangerous and you'll need to be very brave." "I'm brave. I lived on the street for a long time." Arthur spent the dawn hours planning. If Roger wanted to play dirty, he could too, but he would need Isabel's help and her unique ability to hear what others couldn't. At 6 in the morning, he made a call to Dr. Henry Morgan, his lawyer. "Henry, I need you to do a few urgent things for me. First, I want you to contact St. Benedict's Hospital in Columbus. I have information about a patient admitted 4 years ago. Carmela Vance. Arthur, it's 6 in the morning. What's going on?" "I'm about to discover that my partner is a criminal, and I have a child to protect. Can you help me or not?" "Of course I can. Go on." "Second, I need you to prepare documents for a complaint of signature forgery, tax fraud, and blackmail. And third, arrange a safe place for a 4-year-old girl until we resolve this." "Arthur, are you sure about what you're doing?" "For the first time in 4 years, I'm absolutely sure." Arthur hung up the phone and looked at Isabel, who had woken up and was watching everything attentively. "Ready to help find your mom?" he asked. "Ready," she replied, her eyes shining with determination. "But first, can I tell you a secret I heard?" "Of course." "Last night, while you slept in the chair, someone entered the building. Someone who tried to mess with the safe again, but I heard everything he did." Isabel's revelation made Arthur's blood run cold. "Someone came in here during the night? Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she replied, getting up from the blanket and walking to the safe. "It was the bad man. He came 2 hours after you fell asleep. He came up the stairs trying not to make noise, but his shoes make a special sound on the floor. What did he do? He tried to mess with the safe again, but he couldn't because you had changed something. Then he went to your desk and messed with the papers. He took some things and put others in their place. Arthur rushed to his desk, examining the documents he had left organized. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but when he looked more closely, he noticed that some papers were in slightly different positions. Roger had been there, looking for something or planting additional evidence. "Isabel, did you see what he took or put? I saw him take that blue folder that was under the other papers," she said, pointing to the desk, and he put a white sheet in its place. A sheet that smelled different from the others. Arthur searched through the documents until he found a sheet that did, in fact, have a slightly chemical smell, as if it had been recently printed. It was a contract he had never seen, dated 3 months ago, with his signature authorizing the transfer of funds to an offshore account. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. Roger wasn't just covering his tracks, he was creating additional false evidence to ensure Arthur would sink with him if he tried to resist. The phone rang, making them both jump. It was Dr. Henry Morgan. "Arthur, I got in touch with St. Benedict's Hospital. Carmela Vance has indeed been a patient there for 4 years. Diagnosis of severe stress-induced psychotic disorder. How is she now?" "According to the doctor, much better. In the last 6 months, she has shown significant improvement. He said she constantly asks about her daughter, a girl named Isabel." Arthur looked at the child, who had come closer to listen to the conversation. "And what about visitation?" "Possible, but it requires a court order because there's no registered family. Apparently, the person who had temporary custody of the child disappeared shortly after the admission." "Aunt Rose," Isabel whispered. "Henry, I've obtained evidence that my partner forged my signature on several documents and blackmailed Carmela before her admission. I need you to prepare a strategy for today's hearing." "What kind of evidence?" "Recordings, forged documents, and a very special witness who heard confessions Roger has no idea were detected. A 4-year-old child can't be a legal witness, Arthur, but she can lead us to the evidence we need. Henry, trust me. I have a plan." After hanging up, Arthur knelt in front of Isabel. "You said you heard Roger messing with the desk. Did you hear if he made any calls or said anything?" "I did," she replied, closing her eyes to concentrate on the memory. "He called someone and said, 'Everything is ready for today. The old man will either accept the deal or he'll see what happens to those who don't cooperate. And about the girl, she can't keep running around loose. She knows too much." Arthur's stomach churned. Roger didn't just want to destroy him. He wanted something with Isabel, too. Did he say anything else? He said that after the hearing, he would solve the problem of the child once and for all, and that her mother would never leave the hospital. The threat to Isabel was the last straw. Arthur had tolerated the betrayal, the blackmail, even the manipulation, but threatening an innocent child crossed every line. "Isabel, I need you to help me with something very important today, but it could be dangerous." "More dangerous than living on the street?" she asked with devastating simplicity. "No," he replied, realizing this girl had faced more dangers in her 4 years than he had in his entire life. "But it will require you to be very brave and very smart." "What do I need to do?" Arthur explained his plan. It was risky, depended on perfect timing and Isabel's unique ability to pick up sounds others couldn't. But if it worked, it would be enough to expose Roger and protect them both. At 9 o'clock, they headed to the courthouse. Arthur had arranged with Dr. Morgan that he would arrive shortly before the scheduled time, as if he were late and disorganized. Roger, always punctual, was already in the hearing room when they arrived. "Arthur," Roger approached with his characteristic false smile. "I thought you weren't coming. Did you bring the papers we talked about?" "I did," Arthur lied, feigning nervousness. "But first, Want to understand a few details better? There are no details to understand. You either sign the transfer or face the consequences. Isabel, whom Arthur had instructed to stay close but pretend she didn't know him, approached Roger from behind. Her presence went unnoticed by the man, who was focused on pressuring Arthur. "The evidence against you is irrefutable," Roger continued, lowering his voice. "Contracts with your signature, transfers authorized by you, all documented. Even if you prove the signatures are forgeries, it will take years in court, time you don't have. And Carmela? What happens to her?" "Carmela will stay where she is. Her doctor has received instructions to keep her medicated indefinitely. Paranoia issues, you understand. Too unstable to return to the real world." Isabel positioned herself strategically behind a column, where she could hear everything but remained invisible. Arthur continued the conversation, knowing that every word was being captured by the girl's extraordinary hearing. "And if I accept the deal, you guarantee you'll leave Carmela and her daughter in peace?" Roger laughed softly. "The daughter? Arthur, you don't get it. The child poses a risk. With that special hearing she has, she might have heard things she shouldn't have. She needs to be properly taken care of." "What does that mean?" "It means there are specialized orphanages for children with special needs, places where she will receive appropriate medication for her anomalous auditory condition. Very discreet places." The coldness with which Roger spoke of drugging a 4-year-old child to silence her made Arthur fight the urge to punch the man right there. But he had to maintain the charade until he had all the necessary evidence. "You already have it all arranged. I have contacts at an institution in Zanesville, very discreet, very efficient. The child will simply disappear from the system. No records, no trace." At that moment, Dr. Henry Morgan approached. "Arthur, I need to speak with you before the hearing begins." Roger stepped back slightly, but remained close enough to hear. "Doctor, I've discovered something disturbing about my partner," Arthur said, raising his voice slightly. "It seems he has plans for a missing child." "What kind of plans?" asked Henry, following the script they had arranged. "Plans to make her disappear permanently in an institution where she will be medicated to lose her special abilities." Roger turned pale. "What are you two talking about?" "We're talking about Isabel Vance," said Henry, "daughter of Carmela Vance, who was blackmailed by you until she had a nervous breakdown." "You have no proof of anything," Roger retorted, but there was panic in his voice. "Yes, we do," said a small but firm voice. Everyone turned to see Isabel stepping out from behind the column, holding a small recorder Arthur had given her. "I recorded everything you said about my mother and about me," she said, looking directly at Roger. "And now everyone will know what kind of bad person you are." Roger's face transformed completely upon seeing Isabel with the recorder. The mask of civility he had maintained for years crumbled, revealing an expression of fury and despair that made several people in the courthouse hallway instinctively step back. "You can't use that," he said, taking a step toward the girl. "Recording without consent is illegal, and the testimony of a disturbed child is worthless in court." "Disturbed," repeated Isabel, tilting her head with that thoughtful expression Arthur already knew well. "I'm not disturbed. I'm special, and I can hear when people lie through their teeth." Dr. Morgan positioned himself between Roger and Isabel. "Mr. Malone, I suggest you keep your distance from the child. And as for the recording, it was made in a public space with the knowledge of one of the parties involved, which makes it admissible as evidence." "This is a setup," shouted Roger, drawing the attention of other lawyers and courthouse staff. "You planned this to frame me." "We planned to document the truth," Arthur replied, keeping his voice calm despite the anger he felt. "The same truth you tried to cover up 4 years ago when you destroyed Carmela's life." At that moment the hearing was called. Judge Margaret Silver, a middle-aged woman known for her strictness, entered the room, followed by the clerk and the public prosecutor assigned to the case. Gentlemen, we are here to discuss the tax irregularities of Kensington Equipment, she announced. I understand there is evidence of under-invoicing and tax evasion. Mr. Kensington, do you have anything to declare? Arthur stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. Your Honor, I have discovered that I was the victim of signature forgery and blackmail by my partner. I have evidence that proves my innocence and the guilt of the person truly responsible for the irregularities. What evidence? Asked the judge. Dr. Morgan presented Carmela's recordings, the forged documents found in the safe, and the handwriting analysis he had urgently requested the night before, proving that several signatures on compromising contracts had been forged. And who is this child? Asked the judge, noticing Isabel sitting next to Arthur. Isabel Vance, daughter of a former employee who was a victim of blackmail and psychological pressure that resulted in her psychiatric institutionalization. The child has additional evidence regarding Mr. Malone's criminal activities. Roger jumped out of his chair. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A 4-year-old child cannot be considered a reliable witness. Besides, she was clearly manipulated into saying what they wanted to hear. No one told me to say anything, said Isabel, rising from her chair with a dignity impressive for her age. I only told the truth because bad people can't keep hurting other people. The judge studied the girl with interest. Child, do you understand where you are and why you're here? I do, Mom. I'm here because the bad man, she pointed at Roger, made my mum sick and left me alone on the street. And now he wants to do the same thing to Mr. Arthur. And how do you know this? Because I heard him confess everything. He said he was going to make me disappear in a house where they would give me medicine so I couldn't hear the special things I hear anymore. The room fell into absolute silence. The judge asked to hear the recording Isabel had made, and as Roger's voice confessing his plans echoed through the room, the man's face lost all its color. Mr. Malone, said the judge after listening to the entire recording, do you confirm that this is your voice? Roger was visibly panicked. Your Honor, I was being pressured, blackmailed. I said those things under duress. Duress from whom? From a 4-year-old child. Roger's lawyer, Dr. August Reed, stood up nervously. Your Honor, my client would like to request a recess to re-evaluate his position in the case. Recess denied, the judge replied dryly. We have sufficient evidence to proceed. Mr. Malone, you are being formally charged with document forgery, tax fraud, blackmail, and threats against a minor. Your accounts are being frozen immediately, and an arrest warrant will be issued. Roger stood up abruptly, his chair toppling backward with a crash. This isn't over. You don't know who you're messing with. Mr. Malone, I suggest you calm down, said the judge, signaling for the court officers to approach. I have contacts. I have people who owe me favors. This child will pay for this, and so will you, Arthur. Roger's explicit threats only worsened his situation. The officers approached to restrain him, but he continued to shout, Carmela will never get out of that hospital, I guarantee it. And the girl will disappear once and for all. Isabel hid behind Arthur, frightened by Roger's uncontrolled fury. Arthur hugged her protectively, feeling that he could finally offer her the security that had been missing from her life. Mr. Malone, said the judge, raising her voice, your threats are being recorded and will be included in the charges. Officers, please escort the defendant out of my courtroom. As Roger was led away in handcuffs, still shouting incoherent threats, the judge addressed Arthur. Mr. Kensington, based on the evidence presented, it is clear that you were a victim of your partner's criminal actions. The tax charges against you are being dropped, and your assets will be unfrozen. Arthur felt such a great relief that his legs almost gave out. Thank you, Your Honor. And as for the child, the judge continued, we will arrange for immediate contact with St. Benedict's Hospital to re-evaluate the mother's situation. If she is in a condition to receive visitors, a supervised meeting will be arranged. Isabel looked at the judge with hope in her eyes. "Can I see my mom?" "We will do our best, child. And in the meantime, you will be under the temporary care of Mr. Kensington, if he agrees." "I agree completely," Arthur said immediately. When they left the courthouse, Dr. Morgan was beaming. "Arthur, congratulations. You not only cleared your name, but also got justice for Carmela and Isabel." But Arthur was worried. "Roger's threats have left me uneasy. He said he has contacts, people who owe him favors." "Desperate men say a lot of things," Henry replied. "He's arrested. He'll answer for multiple crimes. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Isabel tugged on Arthur's sleeve. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. When the police were taking him away, I heard him whisper into his cell phone before they took it. He said something about activating Plan B, and that the operation at the hospital must continue as planned." Arthur's blood ran cold. Even under arrest, Roger still had cards up his sleeve, and Carmela, alone and vulnerable in the psychiatric hospital, was still in danger. "Henry," he said urgently, "we need to get to St. Benedict's Hospital before it's too late." The drive from Springfield to Columbus had never seemed so long. Arthur drove with controlled haste while Dr. Morgan made frantic calls trying to contact St. Benedict's Hospital. Isabel was in the back seat, strangely silent, her eyes fixed on the landscape passing by the window. "I couldn't speak to the doctor in charge of Carmela," Henry said, hanging up the phone for the third time. "They said he's in surgery and can only be contacted in emergencies." "This is an emergency," Arthur replied, accelerating slightly. "Not to them. A psychiatric patient with a stable condition for months doesn't constitute a medical priority." Isabel leaned forward. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course," said Arthur, looking in the rearview mirror. "If the bad man is in jail, how can he still hurt my mom?" It was a question Arthur had been trying not to think about. Sometimes bad people make deals with other bad people. Even when they're in jail, they can call in favors, like gangs, she asked with disturbing naturalness. Arthur exchanged a worried glance with Henry. A 4-year-old shouldn't know about such things, but someone who had lived on the streets had probably seen more of real life than many adults. "Not exactly like gangs," he explained carefully, "more like people who work together to do wrong things." St. Benedict's Hospital was located in the Northland area, a large and imposing complex that looked more like a fortress than a treatment center. When they arrived, it was already past 5 in the afternoon, and the flow of visitors was dwindling. At the reception, a middle-aged nurse greeted them with a bored expression. "Visitation only with prior authorization and medical supervision," she said, without looking up from her paperwork. "We have a court order," said Henry, presenting the documents the judge had provided. "Urgent case involving a minor at risk." The nurse examined the papers more closely. "Carmela Vance. Let me check the file." She typed on the computer, her brow furrowing progressively. "That's strange." "What's strange?" asked Arthur. "Her file was altered this morning. Change of medication. Transfer to the maximum security wing. Indication of acute instability." She looked at them with suspicion. "Are you sure you want to see this patient? According to this, she had a violent episode last night." Isabel approached the counter. "That's not true. My mom was never violent, not even when she was very sad." The nurse looked at the girl in surprise. "Are you the patient's daughter?" "I am." "And what's written there is wrong." Henry leaned over the counter. "Nurse, how long have you worked here?" 15 years. "And have you ever seen files being altered suspiciously?" The woman hesitated, looking around to see if anyone was listening. "Sometimes adjustments are made, especially when there's external pressure to keep certain patients institutionalized for longer." "What kind of pressure?" "Financial, usually. Some patients have benefactors who pay for prolonged treatment." She lowered her voice even more. "And there are doctors who don't ask many questions when the payment is generous." Arthur felt nauseous. Are you saying Carmela might be kept here against her will? I can't say that officially, the nurse replied, but I can say that Dr. Blackwood, her attending physician, received specific instructions this morning to significantly increase her medication. Where can we find Dr. Blackwood? He left early today, said he had a family emergency. The nurse paused, studying the worried faces before her. But there's something you should know. Carmela Vance was scheduled for discharge next week. She's been showing consistent improvement for 6 months, and now, with the changes in her file, she could be here indefinitely. Isabel tugged on Arthur's blouse. Can I see my mom now, please? The nurse looked at the girl, then at the court documents, clearly torn between protocol and compassion. Technically, you have authorization, but she's in the secure wing. It can only be for a few minutes. They were escorted down a long, poorly lit corridor to the maximum security wing. The environment was more like a prison than a hospital. Locked doors, barred windows, and an oppressive silence that echoed with every step. Room 347, said the nurse, stopping before a heavy door with a small observation window. She received strong sedatives this morning, so she might be drowsy. When they opened the door, Arthur saw a thin woman sitting on a narrow bed, looking out the barred window. She had changed drastically since she had worked for him, graying. A face marked by suffering, but her eyes still held the intelligence he remembered. Carmela, he said softly. She turned slowly, as if in slow motion. Arthur, you came for me? Yes, I came for you, and I brought someone special. Isabel stepped forward, running to her mother. Mom, it's me, it's Isabel. The reunion between mother and daughter was both moving and devastating. Carmela hugged the girl as if she couldn't believe she was real, whispering words of love and apology as tears streamed down her face. My little one, she murmured, where have you been? I looked for you for so long. I was on the street, Mom. Aunt Rose left me alone. Carmela's face contorted in pain. It was my fault. I shouldn't have trusted her. I shouldn't have left you. It wasn't your fault, said Isabel, hugging her mother tighter. It was the bad man's fault. But he can't hurt us anymore. Arthur approached. Carmela, Roger is in jail. The recordings you made, the documents you hid, everything helped prove the truth. Roger in jail? She asked, seeming to gradually emerge from the fog of the sedatives. But then, why am I still here? Dr. Blackwood said I had an episode, that I needed more medication. Dr. Blackwood is following Roger's orders, Henry explained. Even in jail, he still has contacts who are trying to keep you here. Carmela held Isabel's hands, studying her daughter's face. You've grown so much, and you're so thin. Did you eat today? Mr. Arthur gave me food. He took care of me. Thank you, Carmela said, looking at Arthur with gratitude. Thank you for protecting my daughter. She helped me as much as I helped her, he replied. Carmela, I need to ask you, do you remember leaving? Isabel's birth certificate in my safe, I remember. I was afraid Roger would try to use her against me somehow. I hid it in the safest place I knew. And do you feel ready to leave here? To take care of Isabel again? Carmela hesitated, looking around the sterile room. I'm scared. 4 years in here. I don't know if I still know how to live out there. You don't have to do it alone, Arthur said. I have a proposal for you both. At that moment, the nurse appeared at the door with an urgent expression. You need to leave now. Dr. Blackwood just arrived and he's furious. He said the visit was authorized illegally. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, approaching quickly. Dr. Blackwood appeared at the door, a tall, thin man with a stern expression that became even darker when he saw Isabel in Carmela's arms. What the hell is going on here? He roared. This patient cannot receive visitors. She's in a critical state. I have a court order, said Henry, presenting the documents again. Invalid authorization. This patient poses a danger to herself and others, especially to children. He signaled for two large orderlies who appeared behind him. "Remove the child immediately." "No," shouted Isabel, clinging to her mother. "I'm not leaving you alone again." "And you won't," said Arthur, placing himself between the orderlies and Carmela. "Carmela Vance is being released under my responsibility." "That's impossible," protested Dr. Blackwood. "She needs continuous treatment." "She needs freedom," Arthur retorted, "and I'll make sure she gets it." But as they argued, Isabel heard something the others didn't. Footsteps approaching from the emergency stairs, low voices coordinating some kind of operation. Someone was coming, and they weren't people who wanted to help. "There are people coming up the stairs," Isabel whispered to Arthur, her special hearing picking up sounds still too far for the others to perceive. 3 men. "They're talking about taking someone away." Arthur felt the danger approaching like a storm. "Henry, we need to get out of here now." "No one is leaving," said Dr. Blackwood, blocking the door. "This patient is under my care and cannot be removed without proper medical authorization." "Doctor," said Carmela, her voice getting clearer as the effects of the sedatives wore off, "you know very well I don't need to be here. I've been asking for a re-evaluation for months." "Your condition requires continuous observation," he insisted, but there was sweat on his forehead, especially after yesterday's violent episode. "What violent episode?" asked Carmela, confused. "I spent all of yesterday reading in the common room. Ask any nurse." The footsteps Isabel had detected were getting closer. She tugged on Arthur's sleeve again. "They're on our floor now. One of them said something about getting the package and taking it to the agreed location." Arthur made a quick decision. "Carmela, do you trust me? I trust you. Then take Isabel and follow the nurse who brought us here. There's an emergency exit at the end of the hall." "I can't allow this," protested Dr. Blackwood, trying to block the path, but Henry intervened. "Doctor, I have a court order here that authorizes me to remove Carmela Vance from this hospital if we consider her safety to be at risk, and we do." At that moment, 3 men dressed in hospital staff uniforms appeared in the hallway. They looked legitimate at first glance, but there was something in the way they moved, in the tension in their eyes, that immediately alerted Arthur. "Dr. Blackwood," said the man in front, tall and muscular with a scar on his forehead, "we've come to pick up the patient from room 347 as agreed." "What agreement?" asked the nurse who had helped them. "Transfer to a private clinic," the man replied, but his eyes were fixed on Isabel, not Carmela. "Dr. Blackwood's orders." "I didn't authorize any transfer," said Dr. Blackwood, and Arthur realized that even the corrupt doctor was realizing the situation had spun out of control. The man with the scar smiled coldly. "Doctor, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Our instructions are very clear." Isabel hid behind Carmela, whispering, "Mom, these men are lying." I can hear their hearts beating like people who are about to do bad things. Carmela, even still under the effect of medication, instinctively understood the danger. She picked up Isabel and retreated towards the room's window. "Henry," Arthur said softly, "call security. Now." "I'm already calling," the lawyer replied, but the man with the scar was faster, snatching the phone from his hand. "No one's calling anywhere," he said. "You'll either come with us politely, or we'll have to use less gentle methods." "Who sent you?" asked Arthur. "People who pay better than you," replied another of the men, smaller but with cold eyes that made Arthur think of a predator. Dr. Blackwood, realizing he had lost control of the situation, tried to back away. "I had no part in this. I only received orders to keep the patient sedated." "Doctor," said the man with the scar, "I suggest you keep your mouth shut if you want to keep your job, and other things." The explicit threat made Dr. Blackwood turn even paler. Arthur realized the doctor was also a victim of blackmail, probably in debt to the same people who worked for Roger. "What do you want?" asked Arthur. "The child," the man replied simply. "She knows things she shouldn't. She needs specialized treatment." "Never," said Carmela, hugging Isabel tighter. "You won't touch my daughter." "Ma'am, don't make this harder than it has to be," said the third man, approaching slowly. "The girl will just go to a place where she'll receive care appropriate for her anomalous auditory condition." "My daughter doesn't have an anomaly," Carmela retorted with growing strength. "She has a gift that can be properly managed," said the man with the scar. "With the right medication, she can have a normal life without hearing things that disturb her." Isabel lifted her head from her mother's shoulder. "You want to give me medicine so I can't hear anymore?" "Exactly, little one. For your own good. But if I can't hear the special things anymore, how will I know when people are lying? How will I protect my mother?" The child's innocent question exposed the cruelty of the plan. They didn't just want to silence her temporarily. They wanted to permanently destroy her unique ability. At that moment, the nurse who had helped them took a brave step. "I'm calling hospital security," she said, heading for the door. "No, you're not," said the smaller man, blocking her path. "You're going to stay right here and pretend you saw nothing." "I've worked here for 15 years, she said with dignity. "I will not allow you to harm a child." "Then you'll find out what it's like to work somewhere else," he replied coldly. It was then that Isabel did something unexpected. She slipped from her mother's arms and walked directly to the man with the scar, looking him in the eyes with a courage that impressed everyone present. "You're scared," she said. "I can hear your heart beating very fast. And you're lying about wanting to help me." "Smart kid," the man muttered. "It will be interesting to work with you." "But I can also hear something else," Isabel continued. "I can hear that you're not the only ones here." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" "There are more people in the hospital, people in different uniforms, and they're coming up the stairs now." Arthur realized that Isabel's exceptional hearing had detected something that could change everything. She could hear movement in parts of the hospital that were too far for anyone else to notice. "How many people?" he asked. "Many," she replied. "And they have equipment that makes different noises than usual." The man with the scar exchanged nervous glances with his accomplices. "It could be hospital security." "No," said Isabel, tilting her head to listen better. "It's different. They have radios and are talking about an operation and suspects." Carmela, who was watching everything, suddenly smiled for the first time in years. "They're federal agents, aren't they?" Arthur nodded. Henry must have managed to contact the authorities before his phone was taken. The man with the scar began to back away. "Change of plans. We're leaving through the emergency exit." "With the child," added the smaller man. "Without the child," said a new authoritative voice from the door. Everyone turned to see two federal agents entering the room, followed by hospital security. "Agent Sterling, FBI," said the woman in front. "You're surrounded. Hands on your head." The three men hesitated for a moment, clearly considering resisting. But when more agents appeared in the hallway behind the first two, they realized they had no chance. "This isn't over," the man with the scar said to Arthur as he was handcuffed. "There are more people involved in this than you can imagine." Isabel ran back into her mother's arms. "Are we safe now?" she asked. "Now we're safe," Carmela replied, but tears of relief and exhaustion were streaming down her face. Arthur approached Agent Sterling. "How did you know we were here?" Dr. Henry Morgan managed to make a call before his phone was taken. "We've been investigating a corruption network linked to psychiatric hospitals for months. Your case was the missing piece. And Dr. Blackwood? He will be investigated, but he seems to be more of a victim than a criminal. Apparently, he was being blackmailed over gambling debts." As the agents organized their exit from the hospital, Carmela held Isabel and looked at Arthur with deep gratitude. "What happens to us now?" she asked. "Now," said Arthur, "you're coming home with me. I have a proposal that might interest you both." A week later, Carmela and Isabel were settled in Arthur's house, an elegant townhouse in the Oakwood neighborhood of Springfield. The adjustment wasn't easy for either of them. Carmela, after 4 years of institutionalization, felt lost in the outside world. Even choosing what to wear in the morning made her anxious. Isabel, in turn, woke up every night screaming, reliving nightmares from her time on the streets. "I can't do this," Carmela said to Arthur one afternoon, while Isabel played in the yard. 4 years locked up. I've forgotten how to be a mother. Arthur was organizing company documents at the dining room table, trying to rebuild the business after the chaos caused by Roger. "You haven't forgotten. You just need time to remember. And what if I can't? What if Isabel would be better off with another family?" Carmela's voice trembled with deep insecurity. "Carmela, you spent 4 years in an institution, but Isabel spent 4 years on the streets, dreaming of the day she would find you again. She doesn't want another family. She wants you." Just then, Isabel ran into the room. "Mom! There's a man outside the house. He's been watching us for a long time." Arthur stood up immediately, walking to the window. A middle-aged man, thin and poorly dressed, was standing across the street, clearly watching the house. "I've seen him before," said Isabel, approaching the window. "He was near the hospital the day we left. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. He makes a special noise when he walks, like one leg is different from the other." Arthur picked up the phone and called Agent Sterling. "Agent, there's a man watching my house. It might be connected to the Roger Malone case. I'll send a car to check it out. In the meantime, keep your doors locked." While they waited, Carmela approached Arthur. "This is never going to end, is it? There will always be someone trying to hurt us." "It will end," he promised, though he wasn't sure how. "Roger's network was bigger than we imagined, but the FBI is dismantling everything." 20 minutes. Later, Agent Sterling arrived with 2 colleagues. The suspicious man had disappeared, but she brought worrying news. "Roger is negotiating a plea deal," she said. "Apparently there's a larger operation involving other psychiatric hospitals and medical equipment companies." "What does that have to do with us?" asked Arthur. "Everything. Your company supplied equipment to several of these hospitals. Roger may have used those connections to create a much larger corruption network." Carmela turned pale. "Does that mean more people will try to silence us?" "It means we need to speed up the investigation," the agent replied. "And you may need to enter a temporary protection program." The idea of hiding again terrified Carmela. "I can't go back to living on the run. I can't do that to Isabel." "Mom," said Isabel, pulling on Carmela's hand, "can we hear what Mr. Arthur wants to propose first?" Arthur knelt in front of them both. "The proposal is simple. Come work with me in rebuilding the company. Carmela, you know the accounting better than anyone. Isabel, with your special hearing, you can detect irregularities no one else could." "You want a 4-year-old to work?" asked Agent Sterling, surprised. "I want her to use her gift to help other people who might be going through what you went through," Arthur explained. "There are dozens of companies and institutions that could be being manipulated just like mine was." Isabel brightened up for the first time since they left the hospital. "I can help other people like you helped me." "You can, but only if your mother agrees." Carmela hesitated, looking at her daughter. The idea was risky, but it also offered something she hadn't had in years: purpose. "And if we enter this partnership," she asked, "will we have adequate protection?" "You will," Agent Sterling assured them. "In fact, it would be ideal. Keeping you in normal activity while we investigate could give us access to information we couldn't get otherwise." 2 days later, Carmela and Isabel made their first official visit to Kensington Equipment as partners. The company had lost several employees during the crisis, but those who remained welcomed the mother and daughter with curiosity and warmth. "Can little Isabel really hear irregularities in equipment?" asked Martha, the secretary who had been with the company for 15 years. "She can," Carmela replied. "Show her any machine with a defect." Martha took Isabel to A printer that had been causing problems for weeks. The girl approached the machine, put her ear to the side, and listened for a few minutes. "There's a loose part inside," she said. "On the left side, near where the paper gets stuck." Martha opened the printer and found exactly what Isabel had described, a loose screw that was causing anomalous vibrations. "Impressive," she murmured. In the following weeks, Isabel became something of a sensation at the company. She could detect problems in equipment before they caused major failures, identify when suppliers tried to sell defective parts, and even perceive when clients were lying about the technical specifications they needed. But it was during a meeting with a potential client that her ability revealed something much more serious. The company MedTech Solutions had approached Kensington to supply equipment for a new psychiatric clinic they planned to open in Dayton. The representative, Mr. August Fields, an elegant man in his 50s, presented very advantageous proposals: above market prices, payment in full upfront, long-term contracts. "It's an excellent opportunity for us to start over," Arthur said to Carmela during the meeting. But Isabel, who was playing in a corner of the room, suddenly approached Arthur and whispered in his ear, "This man is lying about everything." "What do you mean?" "He doesn't want equipment for a real hospital. He wants equipment to do bad things to sick people." Arthur hid his surprise and continued the meeting normally. But he asked Henry to investigate MedTech Solutions discreetly. 3 days later, Henry brought alarming findings. MedTech Solutions is a shell company. Mr. August Fields is actually August Ferreira, Roger's former partner in other businesses. They're trying to rebuild the network of corrupt hospitals using our company as a supplier, Arthur realized. "And there's more," Henry continued. "Agent Sterling discovered that there are at least 6 clinics being planned in different Ohio cities, all with the same pattern of corruption." Carmela felt sick. They want to create an even larger network to institutionalize and medicate people against their will. Exactly, and use our company to give the operation legitimacy. That night, Arthur made a decision that would change everything. "We'll pretend to accept the proposal," he said to Carmela and Agent Sterling during a meeting at his house. "But we'll document everything for the FBI." "It's too dangerous," Carmela protested. "What if they find out? What if they do something to Isabel?" "Mom," said Isabel, who had overheard the conversation, "if we don't stop these bad men, they'll hurt other children like me." The 4-year-old's wisdom left everyone silent. She was right. They had the opportunity to prevent other families from going through the same suffering they had experienced. "All right," Carmela finally agreed, "but on one condition." "What?" "If something goes wrong, if we realize Isabel is in danger, we stop everything immediately." "Agreed," said Arthur. Agent Sterling took careful notes. "I'll coordinate the operation with recording equipment and undercover agents. But you need to understand that once we start, there's no going back. You'll officially be working as federal informants." Isabel approached Arthur. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course. If we help arrest all the bad men, does that mean my mom and I will finally be able to live in peace?" Arthur looked at Carmela, then at Agent Sterling, and finally at Isabel. "It means exactly that, little one. You'll be able to live in peace." But even as he made that promise, Arthur couldn't help but feel that the most dangerous part of the whole story was just beginning. The operation began 3 weeks later, on a rainy September day that made the streets of Springfield seem even grayer. Arthur arrived at the company earlier than usual, checking for the 10th time the recording equipment the FBI had discreetly installed in his office. Carmela was visibly nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she organized papers on her desk. "Are you sure you can do this?" Arthur asked. "I have to," she replied, taking a deep breath, "for Isabel, for all the other people who could be harmed." Isabel was sitting in a corner of the room, playing with building blocks Arthur had bought for her. But her ears were constantly alert. Agent Sterling had instructed her to act normally, like a child simply accompanying her mother to work. "They're coming," Isabel said suddenly, without looking up from her toys. 3 cars. One of them makes a strange noise in the engine. Arthur looked out the window and saw she was right. 3 black vehicles were approaching the building. The first with a slight engine misfire that only Isabel's extraordinary hearing could have detected. "Carmela, are you ready?" he asked. "Ready," she replied, taking her place behind the desk where she had worked for 3 years. Before her life was destroyed by Roger, August Ferreira entered, accompanied by 2 men who introduced themselves as engineers from MedTech Solutions. One of them, Mr. Charles Rivers, had cold eyes that uncomfortably reminded Arthur of the men who had tried to kidnap Isabel at the hospital. The other, Dr. Frank Lopez, claimed to be an expert in psychiatric equipment. "Mr. Kensington," August said with his characteristic false smile, "I hope you've had time to consider our proposal." "We have," Arthur replied, "and we're interested, but we need to better understand some technical details." Of course, August said. Sitting down comfortably, Dr. Lopez can clarify any questions. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed seemingly normal specifications, monitoring equipment, security systems, specialized furniture. But Isabel, pretending to play, was catching side conversations the men whispered among themselves. "Was the little problem from the last operation resolved?" Charles murmured to August. "Resolved permanently," he replied. "Dr. Blackwood will no longer be a problem." Isabel froze for a moment, processing what she had heard. Dr. Blackwood, the corrupt doctor from the hospital, had been resolved permanently. She didn't fully understand what that meant, but she knew it was nothing good. "And the child who was causing problems," Charles continued in a low voice. "That's still a pending issue," August replied, "but plans are being made." Carmela, though focused on the official meeting, noticed that Isabel had stopped playing and was clearly listening to something the adults couldn't perceive. She discreetly signaled for her daughter to continue feigning normalcy. Regarding the delivery schedule, Dr. Lopez said aloud, "We need the equipment to be ready in 6 weeks. We have patients awaiting transfer." "What kind of patients?" asked Carmela, joining the conversation as per the agreed script. "Patients with complex behavioral issues," Dr. Lopez answered vaguely. "People who would benefit from a more controlled environment." "More controlled how?" she insisted. Charles exchanged a look with August. "Mrs. Vance, right? I heard you have personal experience with psychiatric hospitals." The question was asked with evident malice. They knew exactly who she was and were testing her reactions. "I do," Carmela replied with more courage than she felt. "And that's why I know the difference between proper treatment and abuse." "Interesting perspective," murmured Dr. Lopez. "And your daughter? I hear she has special abilities." "My daughter is a normal child," Carmela said firmly, but Arthur saw the panic in her eyes. Isabel stood up and walked to the table, feigning innocent, childlike curiosity. "Do you work in a hospital?" she asked Dr. Lopez. "We do, little one. We take care of people who have trouble hearing things that don't exist." "Oh," Isabel said with disconcerting naturalness, "like the people you give medicine to so they stop hearing the truth." The silence that followed was tense. Dr. Lopez looked at the girl with renewed and dangerous interest. "What a clever child," he said. "Perhaps we should talk more about your perceptions." "I don't think so," Arthur interrupted, placing himself protectively near Isabel. "Let's get back to the technical aspects of the contract." August smiled, but there was something predatory in his expression. "Of course. But first, I'd like to make an additional proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "We have a research center that studies children with anomalous sensory abilities. It would be a valuable opportunity for your stepdaughter to participate in studies that could benefit many other children." Carmela stood up abruptly. My daughter is not a lab rat. Of course not, Dr. Lopez said smoothly. It would just be observation. And the parents would receive significant financial compensation for the child's time. How much? Asked Arthur, feigning interest while feeling disgusted at having to play the part. $50,000 a month, Charles replied, for non-invasive studies. The amount was absurdly high, confirming that they really wanted Isabel for very specific and very dangerous reasons. And if we accept all the proposals, asked Arthur. Then we'll have a very lucrative and long-term partnership, said August, and all pending legal problems with your company would completely disappear. What legal problems? Asked Carmela. Charles smiled coldly. The documents Roger Malone provided before his arrest showed several irregularities that haven't been investigated yet. It would be a shame if they fell into the wrong hands. The blackmail was explicit. They had forged evidence ready to destroy Arthur if he didn't cooperate. At that moment, Isabel did something no one expected. She approached Charles and looked directly into his eyes. You killed Dr. Blackwood, didn't you? The man turned pale. What did you say? I heard you talking about him being resolved permanently. And your heart is beating like when people do very bad things. Imaginative child, said Charles, but his voice trembled slightly. I don't imagine, Isabel. Replied seriously, I hear that you didn't come here to do business. You came to take me away. August stood up abruptly. I think our meeting is over. I agree, said Arthur, also standing up. But Charles blocked the way to the door. Actually, I think we have some pending matters to resolve. What matters? Asked Arthur. The child knows too much, said Dr. Lopez, and people who know too much can cause problems for legitimate operations. Legitimate operations don't need threats, Carmela retorted. Threats, laughed August. We're not threatening anyone, we're just explaining realities, Then, Isabel whispered to Arthur, there are people coming up the stairs, many people, and they have equipment like the police had at the hospital. Arthur felt a wave of relief. Agent Sterling and her team were arriving as planned. What realities? He asked, buying time. The reality that children with anomalous abilities need specialized supervision, said Dr. Lopez. The reality that businessmen who don't cooperate face difficulties. And the reality that people who ask too many questions sometimes disappear, Charles added coldly. It was at that moment that the door opened and Agent Sterling entered, accompanied by 6 federal agents. FBI, hands on your head! The look of absolute panic on the faces of August and his accomplices was almost comical. Charles tried to run to the window, but was quickly intercepted. You have no proof of anything, shouted Dr. Lopez as he was handcuffed. We have 4 hours of recordings of you confessing to blackmail, threats, and involvement in creating a network of fraudulent hospitals, Agent Sterling replied. And we have a very special witness who heard things you thought no one could hear. Isabel approached the agent. They also talked about making Dr. Blackwood disappear. The revelation made August completely lose his composure. The child is lying. She's disturbed. She can't be considered a reliable witness. The child, Agent Sterling said calmly, helped dismantle a criminal network that was planning to open 6 illegal clinics to institutionalize and medicate people against their will. As the men were led away, Carmela hugged Isabel tightly. Is it over? She asked. Is it finally over? It's over, Arthur confirmed. Now you can live in peace. But when he looked out the window and saw more cars arriving, cars that didn't belong to the FBI, he realized he might have been celebrating too soon. The approaching cars were not from the FBI. Arthur immediately recognized the difference. Dark vehicles, no official markings, moving in a coordinated manner that suggested a military operation or something worse. Isabel had shrunk against Carmela, her large eyes fixed on the window. Agent Sterling, Arthur said urgently, we have company. The agent looked out the window and immediately spoke into her radio. Dispatch, we need immediate backup. possible rescue attempt of the suspects. "It's not a rescue," Isabel whispered, her voice small but clear. "They came for something different. I can hear them talking about cleaning up the evidence." Carmela felt her blood run cold. Evidence? What evidence? "We are the evidence," Arthur realized with growing horror. "We're the only people who can connect the entire network. If they eliminate us—" "They're not eliminating anyone," Agent Sterling said firmly, but her expression betrayed real concern. "We're leaving through the emergency stairs. Now." But as they headed for the door, Isabel stopped abruptly. "They're already on the stairs. 3 men going up, 2 coming down. And there are more people surrounding the building." The girl's extraordinary hearing had detected a perfectly coordinated ambush. They were surrounded. "How much time do we have?" asked Agent Sterling. 2 minutes until they get here," Isabel replied, after concentrating on the sounds. "But there's something strange." "What?" "One of the cars downstairs has someone on the radio talking about protecting the asset. As if some want to hurt me and others want to protect me." The revelation was surprising. There were 2 different factions operating at the same time. "My God," murmured Agent Sterling, understanding the situation. "It must be an internal dispute. Some want to eliminate the witnesses, others want to capture Isabel to use her ability." "Use her how?" Carmela asked with horror. "A child who can detect lies and hear private conversations would be a valuable asset for any criminal organization." At that moment, the building's elevators stopped working. Someone had cut the power. They were effectively trapped on the 2nd floor. "Is there another way out?" asked Arthur. Agent Sterling studied the building's layout. "There's a service passage that connects this floor to the next building. It was used when the 2 buildings were a single company." "Where?" "The file room at the end of the hall." They ran to the file room, a small, dusty area full of old documents. In the back, half hidden by metal shelves, was a door painted the same color as the wall. "It's locked," said Arthur, trying to open it. "Leave it to me," said Isabel, approaching the lock. She placed her ear on the metal and listened to the internal mechanisms for a few seconds. "It's a simple lock. If someone has a paperclip—" Carmela found a paperclip in a nearby drawer. Isabel bent it into a specific shape and inserted it into the lock, moving it with a precision based on what her ears detected. "How does she know how to do that?" asked Agent Sterling, impressed. 4 years living on the street," Carmela answered with sadness. "She learned things a child should never have to know." The lock yielded with a soft click. On the other side was a narrow maintenance tunnel that connected the 2 buildings. "I'll go first," said Agent Sterling, then Isabel, Carmela, and Arthur last. They began to cross the tunnel when they heard loud voices coming from the company. Men shouting, doors being broken down, furniture being overturned. "Where are they?" a voice roared. "They have to be here, boss. We found recording equipment," another voice replied. "The FBI was bugging everything. Then they know everything. We have to find the witnesses before they talk more." Isabel stopped in the middle of the tunnel, turning to the others. "There's something you need to know," she whispered. "What?" "That man who's shouting. I know his voice. From where?" "From the hospital. He was one of the doctors. Dr. Sanders. He always came to see my mom when she was heavily sedated." Carmela turned pale. "Dr. Sanders was involved in my institutionalization." "He was. And now I can hear him talking on the radio with someone. He's saying he has orders to recover the asset and eliminate the complications." The coldness with which they referred to Isabel as an asset and the rest of them as complications terrified everyone. They emerged from the tunnel into the neighboring building, an accounting office that was closed for the weekend. Agent Sterling tried to call for backup on her radio, but the transmission was being jammed. "They have jamming equipment," she murmured. "We're isolated." "Now what?" asked Arthur. "Now we try to get to the car and get out of the area before they realize where we are." But when they got down to the ground floor of the neighboring building, They saw that the street was full of armed men, searching every vehicle, every shop, every possible hiding place. "There are a lot of them," said Isabel, watching through the window. "But some have different uniforms than the others." "What do you mean?" "Some are wearing normal clothes with small badges. Others are wearing military-style gear, and they're not working together. They're watching each other." Isabel's observation was right. There were clearly two forces operating, one that seemed to be composed of corrupt agents trying to cover up the scandal, and another that appeared to be military or paramilitary with its own objectives. "Agent Sterling," said Arthur, "do you have any idea who the second group might be?" "It could be military intelligence. If this network of hospitals was being used for illegal experiments, the army might have an interest in recovering evidence or people involved. Or, said Carmela with a grim voice, they could be mercenaries hired to recover Isabel. At that moment, a distant explosion made the building tremble. Smoke began to rise from where Kensington equipment was located. "They blew up our company," said Arthur in shock. "No," said Isabel, listening intently. "They blew something up, but it wasn't a big explosion. It was small, like when you break one specific thing. The safe," Arthur realized. "They blew up the safe to destroy any evidence that might still be there." Agent Sterling looked out the window again. "The good news is that the explosion has caused confusion. The two groups are blaming each other. We have a window of opportunity." "For what?" "To get to the car and get out of the city. I have contacts in DC who can protect us." They went down to the building's garage where Agent Sterling's car was parked, but as they approached the vehicle, Isabel grabbed Arthur's arm. "There's someone in the car," she whispered. "How do you know?" "I can hear breathing and a heartbeat. A very nervous person." Agent Sterling drew her weapon and carefully approached the vehicle. When she opened the passenger door, a man fell out. It was Dr. Blackwood, the corrupt doctor from the hospital, but now he was clearly terrified and injured. "Dr. Blackwood," said Carmela, shocked. "We thought you were dead," he completed, breathing with difficulty. "Almost. But I managed to escape when I realized they were going to use me as a scapegoat." "Why are you here?" asked Agent Sterling, keeping her gun pointed. "Because you are the only people who can protect me," he replied, "and because I know something you need to know about Isabel." "What?" Dr. Blackwood looked directly at the girl. "Her hearing ability isn't natural. It was caused by experiments they did on her when she was a baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Carmela knelt beside her daughter, her hands trembling. "What experiments?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Neurological experiments to develop amplified sensory capabilities. Isabel was one of the few children who survived the process. The revelation hit everyone like a lightning bolt. Isabel's special ability was not a natural gift. It was the result of illegal medical experiments performed when she was just a baby." "Who authorized this?" asked Arthur, feeling fury rise in his chest. "Roger Malone. He provided orphaned children to a secret military program. Isabel was one of the subjects." Carmela hugged her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "My God, what did they do to you?" "Mom," Isabel said with disturbing naturalness, "I always knew I was different, but that doesn't matter." "What matters is that I can use what I have to help other people." The wisdom and resilience of the 4-year-old left everyone moved and impressed. "Dr. Blackwood," said Agent Sterling, "do you have proof of these experiments?" "I do. Documents, medical records, names of everyone involved. It's all hidden in a safe place." "Where?" "In the last place anyone would look. In the Malone family crypt, at the municipal cemetery." At that moment, voices approached the garage. They had been found again. The voices were approaching the garage quickly, echoing off the concrete walls like war drums. Arthur helped Dr. Blackwood into the car while Agent Sterling started the engine, her hands experienced but visibly tense on the wheel. Carmela held Isabel on her lap, whispering words of comfort she could barely feel herself. "It's them," murmured Dr. Blackwood, peering through the rear window. "The two groups are working together now. They've realized they have a common enemy." "Us," Arthur said bitterly. Agent Sterling sped out of the garage, the tires screeching on the wet asphalt. Behind them, men shouted orders as they ran to their own vehicles. "Where are we going?" asked Carmela. "The municipal cemetery," the agent replied. "If Dr. Blackwood is right about the documents, it might be our only chance to expose the entire network." "And if it's a trap?" asked Arthur. "Then at least we'll try to do something right before we're caught," the agent replied grimly. During the drive through the streets of Springfield, Dr. Blackwood told the full story he had kept for years. His voice trembled not just with fear, but with the guilt he carried. "The program started 6 years ago," he said, staring at his own hands. "It was called Project Sentinel. The goal was to develop children with amplified sensory capabilities for use in intelligence operations." "Child spies," murmured Agent Sterling with disgust. "Worse than that, human detectors, capable of identifying lies, picking up conversations at impossible distances, detecting anomalies that conventional equipment couldn't." Carmela hugged Isabel tighter, and "My daughter was a test subject, one of the first. Roger supplied orphaned babies, abandoned children, minors at risk. Officially, they were being adopted by special families. In reality, they were being tortured in the name of science," Arthur completed. "The experiments involved intense neurological stimulation, controlled exposure to specific sound frequencies, and drugs that altered the development of the auditory cortex." Dr. Blackwood paused, breathing heavily. "Most of the children didn't survive. Those who did, most lost their sanity." "And Isabel?" "Isabel was the only complete success. She developed the desired abilities while maintaining mental and emotional stability. That's why she was so valuable." Isabel, who had heard everything in silence, finally spoke. "Was that why Aunt Rose took me away?" Dr. Blackwood nodded. "Rose Sanders was a nurse on the project. When she realized what was really happening, she decided to save at least one child. She stole you and fled, planning to hide you until she found a safe way to expose everything. But she disappeared," said Isabel, "because they found her first." Rose was silenced before she could speak. The car fell silent, only the sound of the tires on the wet road and the chase approaching in the rear-view mirrors. "Why did you decide to speak now?" asked Agent Sterling. "Because I found out they're reactivating the project. The clinics August wanted to open weren't just for institutionalizing inconvenient people. They were to restart the experiments, now with more refined methods. They reached the municipal cemetery as the sun was setting, casting long shadows among the old tombs. The place was deserted, with only the sound of the wind in the cypress trees and the distant echo of city traffic. "The Malone family crypt is in the old section," said Dr. Blackwood, pointing to an area where the monuments were more elaborate and the marble had darkened with decades of weather. They walked quickly between the gravestones, Isabel walking beside Carmela with a courage that impressed them all. Even in such a grim place, she remained alert, her ears picking up sounds others couldn't perceive. "There are cars coming," she said when they were halfway to the crypt. 3 cars, and they're trying to be quiet." "How much time do we have?" asked Agent Sterling. 5 minutes, maybe less." The Malone crypt was an imposing structure of black marble, decorated with stone angels that seemed to watch visitors with empty eyes. Dr. Blackwood searched among the decorations until he found a small opening behind one of the angels. "Here," he said, pulling out a waterproof folder. "Original documents from Project Sentinel, medical records, financial authorizations, names of everyone involved." Agent Sterling quickly examined the papers under the light of her flashlight. "This is pure gold," she murmured. "With this, we can prosecute dozens of people." "If we get out of here alive," said Arthur, hearing voices approaching. Isabel focused, picking up conversation still too far for the others. "They've split into two groups," she reported. "One is coming through the main entrance, the other from the back. And there's something strange." "What?" "I can hear a third voice on their radio, someone giving orders to both groups. And that voice, I know it. From where? It's the man who visited my mom at the hospital, not Dr. Blackwood, another doctor, one who always talked about special treatments for special children." Dr. Blackwood paled. Dr. Francis Xavier, the original project's scientific coordinator. If he's alive and free, it means the project never really stopped, Agent Sterling completed. They just changed locations. At that moment, flashlights began to appear among the cemetery's trees. They were surrounded again. "Is there any way out?" asked Carmela. "The crypt has a sublevel," said Dr. Blackwood. "It was used for family rituals in the last century. It might have a passage leading out of the cemetery. They found the entrance to the sublevel behind the crypt's marble altar. It was a narrow staircase that descended into absolute darkness, smelling of mold and years of abandonment." "I'll go first," said Agent Sterling, turning on her flashlight. The sublevel was larger than they expected, a series of chambers connected by low corridors. The stone walls were covered with ancient inscriptions and niches that once held coffins. "This way," whispered Dr. Blackwood, following a corridor that seemed to lead away from the center of the cemetery. But when they reached the end of the tunnel, they found a solid wall. There was no exit. "We're trapped," said Arthur. Voices echoed from the top. Of the stairs, their pursuers had found the entrance to the sublevel. "Down there, surround the exit." Carmela knelt beside Isabel. "My dear, I need you to use your special ability one more time." "For what, Mom?" "To find a way out that we can't see." Isabel closed her eyes and concentrated, her breathing becoming slow and controlled. For long minutes, she remained motionless, like a small statue in the darkness of the sublevel. "There's an empty space behind this wall," she finally said, touching the stone. "And I can hear water running on the other side. Running water means there's a connection to the outside," said Agent Sterling. "But how do we get through a stone wall?" "We don't have to go through it," said Isabel, smiling for the first time in hours. "We have to push it. This stone isn't solid like the others. It's lighter." They examined the wall more carefully and discovered that some stones were indeed fake, creating a secret passage that had been sealed for decades. Working together, they managed to move the fake stones, revealing a narrow tunnel that led to an underground stream running beneath the cemetery. "It's our only chance," said Agent Sterling, as the pursuers' voices grew closer. One by one, they entered the watery tunnel, following the current in the hope that it would lead them out of the cemetery and to safety. Behind them, flashlights illuminated the empty sublevel, and shouts of frustration echoed through the stone chambers. But when they emerged from the tunnel on the other side of the cemetery, soaked and exhausted, they found Dr. Francis Xavier waiting for them with a cold smile and a team of armed men. "Congratulations on your creativity," he said, "but the chase is over. Now we're going to have a very important conversation about the future of our little Isabel. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.